I like it. Do you share your How do you share your photos of the world, or do you?
I do. Right now, I tend to use Instagram because I like the interface and the social network, and then I Posse Pesos, one of those, to my website.
Did you use what?
Now we're getting into, let's say, jargon. Posse was mentioned, which is post on your site, syndicate elsewhere. But you also have Pesos, which is the reverse relationship, which is post elsewhere, syndicate to your own site. So if you post on Instagram and Own Your Gram pulls it back to your website, then that's Pesos. If you post on your website and then your website posts a copy to Twitter, that's Posse. And then if you want to come up with some more inventive acronyms, I'm sure somebody has. What was it? Pasta? I forget what pasta was. Doesn't bother me.
So this depends on what the services you're interacting with mostly?
Oh yeah, Instagram doesn't allow you to write to Instagram, so you would have to post there.
Yeah, so going back to the two of Aaron's services, Own Your Gram and Own Your Swarm, those are using micropub to publish to your website, so you would need something that can understand and consume micropub. I'm less familiar with that in the Jekyll area, like static sites. I know it exists. I just don't know.
Yeah, there are a few that have been set up. But we have people in the community who are Jekyll.
Yeah, definitely.
So we probably could find somebody who did that. Let's see. IndieWeb examples of Eddie Hinkle, Marnie McGuire.
Where'd you find this? Where'd you?
On the wiki.
IndieWeb.org/Jekyll. So our wiki has.
Also, this wasn't mentioned earlier, but if you are in our chat, we have a really helpful bot, and you can ask what is blank, and he'll actually search the wiki, and if it matches something, we'll return it. So you can say, "What is Posse?" and he'll give you like the short definition with a link to it.
Does that feature work for Slack as well, or things like that?
It does. It does because the two are bridged.
Yeah.
So whatever you can ask in one, it'll work for any of the servers because they're all in the same room. But there are about 20 examples of individuals who are using Jekyll on their primary sites. Okay. So you have Pelly Weissman had, what was it? There was a web mention pinger that he created for his Jekyll. So
well, I'm talking specifically about micropub. So
yeah,
I know it's out there. I know
people but also did a micropub as well.
So if you're interested in using those services, like that'd probably be where you want to start.
Okay.
Getting like micropub set up on your site.
Okay.
Which I think should definitely be like, I mean, that's so tomorrow's like the creation day.
Yes,
but it's definitely something you can do in a day, I think.
Let's see, GitPub, an experimental Git-based micropub client that works with Jekyll. Or a micropub to GitHub.
GitPub. Okay. And what did you just say?
It's lower on the page. Micropub to GitHub.
Oh, okay.
So this is our collective brain. If we can't remember something, somebody's written it down.
Yep.
That sounds really cool.
I don't know why it says this page is still a stub, though. What's
the requirement for being
a stub? There's no really a strict requirement. I mean, it's pretty much every page is going to evolve. So it's sort of like a placeholder we put on every page. So
I'm going to say it's no longer a stub. It has enough material.
What, micropub?
No, Jekyll. The page for it has a lot of material on it, therefore it is not stubbed.
So for those of you who have done this before, what are some of your favorite tutorials? Like, can people just sort of throw, I'm going to type on lines 47, favorite tutorials or how-tos? Like, is there a blog post or a video or a wiki page where, like, when you were learning or struggling or telling people how to do this, what are some resources that you could point someone to?
From a software development side, like if someone is going to write their own micropub endpoint, there was a session at IndieWebCamp Baltimore 2018 that Aaron led, actually.
How to build a micropub.
How to build a micropub. So he built one in like 30 minutes. He did it in the session live.
Okay.
So from a developing side, that's a good resource.
What was the name of the conference?
IndieWebCamp.
But like IWC Baltimore 2018.
That's the tutorial I followed to make my own micro pub endpoint, and that worked really, really well. It was great fun.
But that's why we record these sessions, because you can go back and watch them, even though some of them are probably dated by now. You can see the
Aaron also did a similar session with a MediaPub endpoint, I think, and I want to say he did that either in New York or was it Nuremberg, or maybe Berlin. But there's a YouTube video where he did it with a media endpoint as well.
So media endpoint is file upload for micropub.
Cool.
If you're in the WordPress page, did a whole bunch of videos on how to set up a WordPress site with IndieWeb tools that he keeps saying he needs to update, so they may be dated.
The advantage of having the media endpoint is then you can use things like Own Your Gram instantly, so that you got all the images and everything posted to your own website if you're still using Instagram, which does make it easier to become the owner of your own content.
Awesome.
Also, to endorse Chris, who's there, he also occasionally writes tutorial posts on his website on how to do specific things that he has realized that people don't know how to do, or that he's discovered.
Is this Bofo Sacco?
Bafo.
Bafo Sacco.
Yeah, that's Chris.
Okay, yeah, we have a link to that. Excellent. Any other resources?
Well, there's stuff all over the wiki, so that you can search through your platform of choice and usually find a variety of methods. So I think really the first place I think to start is, I want to say there's a page on, I think it's cross posting is probably the best one. So read through that page, and there's 6 or 7 different directions, either to your site, from your site, to another site, that describes how all that works. And then once you've figured that out, then you can decide, how do I want to do it? And, you can go from the most complicated methods to the simplest and easiest for things like, if this, then that, can be very useful and helpful and get you there quickly, especially if you don't know a whole lot of coding. So the question is, what level are you at, and what are you comfortable with? Obviously, if you're sitting in a camp and you can ask, super geniuses like David Shansky, hey, how do I do this?
He's saying that so that I'll build new things.
Oh, that's cute.
Chris is the president of his fan club.
Oh, I did hear that. Yes, you did say that earlier.
As I said, he does that so I'll build more things for him.
No, actually, I do it now so he'll build things for everybody else. I mostly have what I want, in a general sense.
Well, you know what they say, flattery will get you everywhere.
So one of the this is I guess more discussion. One of the things that it comes up in my world a lot is open source is great. Sharing how you do things is awesome, but there are also occasionally like threats to being open. So what are some like pain points, or like what are like really barriers for people starting to do this? Like what would be the limitations for some people if you wanted to get involved in this? Even you might want to do it, but you can't. What are some common pain points or barriers to entry?
Most of these, like the micropub ones, Own Your Gram and Own Your Swarm, I think are public by default. So
Okay.
if you have if privacy is a concern, like you're sharing private Instagram photos, like you're locked or whatever, Own Your Gram's not going to work, I'm pretty sure. Because
They're also fragile. Look at Facebook, for example. Bridgie used to support publishing and backfeeding from Facebook, and Facebook changed that, not Bridgie.
yeah, a lot of this
Yeah.
relies on their APIs.
Yeah,
So-
Twitter is like making it harder to have bots and stuff like that. Okay.
So if you're integrating with the service, you're reliant on that service. So the day that no longer works, again, you're either going to have to go back to a more manual way of doing things, or you're going to have to give up on being involved in that service. And there are a lot of people who just, the day that Facebook pulled that out, just left with it. So because they can no longer integrate with Facebook the way they wanted to, it had to be on that service's terms. So it wasn't dead, but it was dead to them.
Right.
So can I just mock have my code mock an actual HTTP session and scrape it?
In theory, but again, that's still fragile. Mm-hmm. So if you want to play cat and mouse with one of these organizations, there are people who do that. But again, one day they change something and suddenly your automation doesn't work, and then you have to spend more time fixing it. And do you want to do that? Back to the pain point. The pain point is if it's one thing if occasionally an organization updates its API, it happens. It's another thing if you're using some sort of unofficial way of doing things. They don't guarantee that it's ever supposed to work.
Support, yeah.
I think for Instagram, both those services, Own Your Gram and Bridgie, are basically scraping because they don't really expose. They have an API, but it's very locked down. Like you have to be like Hootsuite or something, one of these massive integrations. They have some JSON stuff hidden in their pages. I think that's mostly how they do it.
Yeah, the last time I looked.
Mm-hmm. Another barrier for people is you need your own website or somewhere where you can put this stuff. And most people don't have a website. They have Twitter, they have Tumblr, they have Instagram, they have Facebook, but they don't have a place. And in general, to get something like this up and running, you need to put your money where your mouth is. And you don't need to pay a lot, but you do need to pay some money. And for some people, they are very much in the mindset of, but all this stuff is free, so why do I need to pay for it?
Good point.
What's the point? Like, what am I going to get out of it? Now I'm paying and I've got more work. Isn't it supposed to work the other way around? You pay and it gets easier?
Yeah, if you have that philosophy, talk to Manton. That's his business.
Any other pain points, barriers?
Well, the other one is, sorry. I was going to say the other one is it all sounds really nerdy and technical. Like in a lot of cases, so you need to install this WordPress plugin. Some people don't know that WordPress basically needs plugins to run. So especially if you don't want to use the Gutenberg editor. So yeah, like just the fact that you say okay, so you need to install WordPress and then install these plugins. It's like, oh, that's already a lot of work. Like, how do I install WordPress?
So if I just have an index.html page that says, hi, I'm me, am I already on the IndieWeb? Or that's there's no fundamental definition.
There's no interactivity with that, but that as long as you have a page, you are. So the IndieWeb isn't a place; it's a state of mind. So you have a website, you're on the IndieWeb.
Okay.
You want that website to interact with other websites, then you have to do some extra stuff. But let's say you wanted your static site. You can mark up that index.html page with some.
So it does sound like where I'm coming from is this is a good way to start interacting with these tools.
Yeah. So you start with a website and you build from there.
So I'll start integrating my Twitter presence into it.
It's nice. It's nice if you can install a bunch of plugins and get all of the functionality in 5 seconds, but that's not the path everybody takes. That's not a bad thing.
Cool.
Hello.
Hello. Say hi to the gang.
Hey y'all, our group is late, getting back from lunch.
No worries.
Yeah, I know. I really enjoyed the comment in chat, which was when are sessions starting, and the response 30 minutes ago.
Any chance you want to say your name and favorite outdoor activity?
Favorite outdoor activity?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. My name is Steven Bowling, and my favorite outdoor activity is running
I like it.
outside.
We still haven't had any duplicates. I love it. Awesome. Okay, so we've got
tempted to say shot put just to be different.
6 minutes left if we're sticking to time. Does anyone have a question or
we are
I
not
can
sticking
start?
to time because the
Some
other people are just now getting back from lunch.
Oh wow.
So we're just gonna bump the schedule by 10 minutes and have
Okay.
a short session over there.
Okay.
But that's enough time to do stuff. But yeah, 10 extra minutes basically.
Okay.
So don't feel like you're in a rush.
We never did.
Okay, so 16 minutes. Anyone who hasn't spoken have a question or a comment?
Oh, Jack Jameson has joined us.
Hello, Jack.
I like to say hi, Jack, but that has a whole other
What does that mean?
Hi, Dave.
Oh, hi.
Not quite as fun.
Sorry, I've
I have
seen
a
you.
more fun name for highs. Yeah, I've tuned in. Sorry, I missed the first part because I was planning to tune into the DAT session, which was a miscalculation of timing on my part.
Yeah. It wasn't you. The DAT session didn't go.
I think it's just starting now.
So they're going to do DAT now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've been hanging out with him for the last 24 hours, and
Sure, blame me. Blame me.
I told you I get more punny with hanging out with punny people. It was you and Dave.
Okay, so if you want a little recap, we just introduced ourselves, gave a little fun fact. There was this gigantic yoga conference outside with like 300 people in all white. So that inspired, people telling us their favorite activity outdoors
It was white tantric yoga, which I am now going to look up because that was sort of curious what white tantric yoga is.
So we tried to survey the room to see what expertise people had and what tools the people who are already know how to post Instagram and Twitter and other social media to their own site, sort of what tools are they using so that the people who have never done this before can have some idea of the jargon and or the tools and options that we can use. Then we went over a few of the pain points and where we can look for tutorials to get started.
So I guess the next thing, though, is there anybody in the room who wants to do this and wants to build it tomorrow and has questions about actually doing it and needing help and where to go? So, and then tell us what platform you're on, what your site is built with, and then we can kind of help direct you to those places. Because this is a typical, once you've got a domain name and you've got a site up and running, this is probably one of the more common things that people do. And usually if you can solve it for one site like Twitter or an Instagram, it usually becomes much easier to solve it for the 50 others that are out there. So if we know where you're coming from and what you're built on, we can kind of give you some idea or what your coding background is or isn't. We can help you actually get there so that by the end of the day tomorrow you can say, hey, my website now does this thing.
I love it. I'm going to post the 3, so I'm on line 75. I'm going to post the 3 sites that I'm interested in doing this for. They're all GitHub pages based. The third one uses just MK Docs. The first 2, I'm pretty sure, use Jekyll. I'm happy with like HTML and Markdown. I have maybe twice used an API. I'm not a software engineer. I can pip install and do things on the command line.
So you are a intermediate level of technical.
Let's go with intermediate level.
I was going to say,
raise your hand if you are a software engineer by profession. Okay. So 50% of the table. At home, let's see, out of the 5 people there, raise your hand if you're or whatever equivalent appendage. Is it if you are software engineer or by profession? Okay, 1.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know about the people who haven't shown their camera, but so we have a large percentage of people whose professional life is not as a software engineer.
Yeah.
No, 2. I think Eddie's also 1, so that's 3. So good 50%. But at least it isn't 90%. That was
so to the man on the street, I'm a software engineer. To a software engineer,
that's why I said by
relative.
That's why I said by profession. It's as opposed to hobbyist. So is that how you make your living? Is a little different than.
Yeah, in the academic, I'm with her. It's certainly not clear whether you're a software engineer. You're expected to do stuff with computers a lot.
Yeah.
What is do you have a website up right now? And then what is it running?
Okay, well, my website is I am in the process of being completely redone, but I do have a fairly large WordPress site. Okay. And I never really learned WordPress at all. I had somebody else helping me with it, or if you call that helping. It's a mess, and I don't understand it. So I have a messy, don't understand WordPress site. I have a bunch of blogspot sites. I have something on Silverback, and I have like a ton of stuff on Usenet, and I'm just like have a whole trail of stuff behind me. That's a mess.
So for that, we can definitely, like, here is the author of the MicroPub for WordPress plugin.
No, that's Ryan. I just took it over when you
You're the maintainer.
I'm kind of allergic to WordPress, and I like Django and I like Python, and so I'd like to be in the Python world if I can.
Okay, sure.
So whether I do, I think I'm going to end up doing most of my stuff in Django. There might be a phase where I go through Pelican or something like that.
Okay.
But I think the best way to talk to me is to assume that I'm doing Django in a big way, and I can dream, can't I? And so I'm a little disappointed that there isn't a lot of Python talk in this community at this point, but there do seem to be a few people that are doing something.
There are definitely people in the community. I don't know if they're all many are here on site, but they are in chat or they've been to other IndieWebCamps. So hopefully we've documented some stuff on the wiki. I know Kartik uses Django, I think.
He uses Bundle, which runs on Python. Bundle is a set of publishing tools built for the IndieWeb using Python and Django.
Right, Django. Okay.
So Bundle would be probably my thing, I guess.
You can talk. You can definitely talk to Kartik. He's usually pretty available. He has an attendance definitely active in the chat. And he's in Chicago?
I don't think so.
Okay. I haven't asked him where he is.
I just put a link in there for MicroPub for Jekyll. Looks like there's only one documented on this page, but let's start.
So for MT, do you want to build a new site tomorrow? That's your main goal for tomorrow, then.
Yeah, it'll take me more than a day. I've got
we can get a Hello World up. And
I can get I can get a Hello World up tomorrow. I've got a couple of hundred articles on this WordPress site. I've got probably nearly 1,000 on my Blogspot blogs. I write a lot.
Does Blogspot allow export? I've never looked.
Yeah, there's some kind of crappy export.
Well, if you can get it in anything, you can always convert it to something else. It's just
right,
easier.
Right. I think there's some sort of XML dump that can do.
Google is usually pretty good about it.
Looks like we have, so on the Django page specifically, we have 3 people listed as like IndieWeb examples.
Cool.
Which may not help you get started, but these are people we can at least maybe pick their brains. And there is a link on there. There's a web mention implementation for Django. I don't see a MicroPub one, but it sounds like you're going to be starting even more basic than that. So maybe MicroPub.
Well, it sounds like I can implement a MicroPub thing, but so you can tell me what MicroPub is because everybody's assuming that I know that.
Oh, so how long do I
have? We have 8 minutes.
Oh, okay. The short version is, it's basically like a form encoded request sent to your website to publish something. It's based on the MicroPub syntax, the microformats syntax. So
this is wrapped in an HTTP request?
Correct. Right. Yeah, and there's a authorization step beforehand, of course, but ultimately it's just sending a form request off to your site, and it builds a post based on that.
Okay.
But the nice part is once you implement that and have it working for your site, there are 20 plus different clients you can log into and use to post all kinds of crazy different things to your own website. So because it's an open spec, anybody can build a new client that does something super specific. So once you get that up and running, it gives you a huge amount of power and leverage over using anything for your site almost.
There is a probably like the best example client that we have for that is Aaron's Quill, and it lets you post notes, longer articles. The articles, the editor is kind of like a medium editor. It's like a big empty screen, has nice formatting. It does photos, check-ins, travel posts.
Aaron is known for making the reference implementation of most things.
So yeah, it's kind of like a reference implementation. A really good introduction, and then we have a bunch of others that get specialized.
Okay, so it sounds like that's first, and then talking to Twitter is
Yeah,
second.
yeah.
Okay. And I know what I'm doing.
So the other thing that'll help folks who haven't done this before, typically if you can search the IndieWeb Wiki for something like a project that you're already using, like WordPress or let's say GitHub Pages, you can find that. Or if you've got a particular language you're writing in, you can search for that language and find examples of people who've done it before, or even things like, there's a page for MicroPub that exists that has, so let's say nobody's written something in Python yet. There may be 8 other implementations in 10 other languages that you may know or know enough about that you can use those open source versions to create the same thing you need, as well as looking at the original spec. Mm-hmm. So that you can, the whole point of a lot of what we're doing is that nobody should start from ground zero, scratch, be totally in the dark and not have any idea what's going on. It's open sourcing and creating places to find to start so that when you decide, hey, I want to do this thing, that you can see examples of how other people have done it in the past, or share your own examples of how you've done it, so that everybody can kind of follow the yellow brick road to do that same type of thing. And if you understand nothing else but that, you'll get a whole lot farther, a whole lot faster. And then it also obviously helps to know three pieces of the lingo as you go along. But, you can ask in chat and Loki will tell you what those things mean. Or you can go into chat and say, hey, I want to publish this thing from this place to that place. And somebody will help you know what that lingo is, so that then you can read about it and figure out where you're going.
Very cool. So, okay, I have a since we're in overtime here, I have a slightly different question. Like, how long, this appears to be like a lovely little vibrant community. Y'all hang out on Saturdays together. How long has this IndieWeb community been around, and how many people are a part of it?
Let's start with, it doesn't just happen on Saturdays. The camps are a good place to get together, but literally there's somebody online 24 hours a day, almost anywhere in the world, doing this stuff. It's just really concentrated on camp days. But I think it started back in 2011.
It started in 2010 on July 18th at the Federated Social Web Summit in Portland, Oregon, when Aaron Parecki and Tantra Kelly sat at a table and decided what they wanted was a different focus, a focus on creators instead of talkers, self-dogfooding, which is a term we're still trying to find a better term for, own your data. They decided to use the term IndieWeb to focus this movement. The next year, they joined together with Amber Case and Crystal Beasley, who are the founders of IndieWebCamp as opposed to the IndieWeb movement, which apparently is the difference between the two. And the first IndieWebCamp was organized in Portland, Oregon on June 25th and 26th, 2011. Since then, there have been many IndieWebCamps. In 2011, only one. In 2012, there were 2. In 2013, 3. Then we get to 2014, where we had a whopping 6, including one of them that was online. And we kept growing.
Oh, cool.
And starting this year, we have, of course, Austin. We have an online event planned for the first time since 2014. New Haven, Berlin, Dusseldorf, the 9th annual summit, and more being planned every day. Last year, we had, Baltimore, Dusseldorf, the summit in Portland, San Francisco, Oxford, New York, Nuremberg, and Berlin. We've had Dusseldorf, apparently we had must not notice that one. MIT, we did a few times, Brighton, UK, Los Angeles. Let's see what else is Edinburgh. We had that one year. So anybody who lives in a city that isn't this one and wants to start one up, if you're interested enough and you think you can get enough people into a room, if not, we have a bi-monthly event, the HWC, the Homebrew Website Club, which is a meetup where you can just get together for 2 hours in an evening and just chat. And all you need for that is a coffee shop. So just go somewhere, sit there, say it's a Homebrew Website Club, and invite whoever you want.
Cool.
Or even a public library.
Ooh, yeah.
And you don't have to pay for coffee.
Or we have the Virtual Americas and the Virtual European Homebrew Website Club, which is conducted in this nice Jitsi room we've had set up.
Okay.
there is an event you can join that will cost little to nothing to participate in, except maybe your sanity and possibly website hosting costs.
Is there a, so like talking about putting Twitter on your site, is there a own your gram, own your swarm equivalent for Twitter? Bridgie?
Well,
no. Well,
Bridgie.
It's not a micropub. There's no micropub from getting tweets back to your site that I know of. Bridgie Publish makes it really easy for you to post it on your site first and then syndicate it to Twitter. And then Bridgie will also give you back feeds. So like if somebody replies to that or likes it, if their account is public, it'll send a web mention back to you.
Okay.
So then you and in a way that you can then parse that if you want to show it as a comment or just like count or whatever you want to do with it, basically.
Okay, cool.
So you don't actually have to interact with Twitter.com at all.
I don't remember the last time I interacted with Twitter.com.
But you tweet. Theoretically.
Technically.
Yeah,
I'm sure I do because people are replying to me, but I haven't got in there and actually actively tried to find people in a while.
We're actually at the end.
So we're at
We
time?
have 4 minutes until the next session. So I mean,
Okay.
if we want to keep talking, that's fine. But yeah.
Just to remind you, in this room, the next session is location data services, and that will be in the Where Am I room on Jitsi, for those of you joining in from home.
Okay, well, thanks everyone who showed up and asked questions or shared resources or enjoyed listening to the conversation. Maybe we'll see you in another room.
Okay.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you for your participation. And this stream will now end. This concludes our broadcast day. Everybody wave.
Cool.
Oh, look who's here. There. Cool. So this is, again, location data sources, not services. It was mischaracterized. And again, you can join us in the Etherpad, which is Where Am I? That is scheduled to start on the hour in approximately 60 seconds. Until then, please enjoy. Anybody have some easy listening?
None of my music is easy listening.
I'll come up with something.
Hey Siri, play Careless Whisper.
I was going to try this one.
You're alive, it's such a happy feeling. You're growing inside, and when you wake up, it's such a very good
Careful, we don't want copyright strikes on YouTube.
Yeah, right.
Demonetized.
Yes, but I don't think we have monetization on it. I forget it. If they find a snippet of possibly copyrighted content, does that mean they force you to monetize or they force you to not monetize? Either way, I pay for premium YouTube, so I'm fine. They've already monetized me. They're tired of seeing the same car ad 2 times.
I just try to avoid YouTube. It's not always very possible. So,
It's 2:01, so why don't we get started? My name is Anil Nazareth. I'm facilitating this session. What I'm hoping to get out of this session is a discussion of location data, how we collect it, what sources we get it from, how we get it usefully from those sources, and maybe if people are interested and we run out of steam on those, we can talk about what we do with it. So I'll kick things off. I am an avid traveler, and I have used a bunch of things over the years, but lately have mostly settled on GPS devices and the Foursquare Swarm ecosystem, and also the EXIF data on my photos. Would you like to introduce yourself? And
yeah, sure. So I'm Stephen. I track location mostly through apps on my phone using GPS. So it's automatically connected to the background. I use Aaron Barecki's Compass client. I forget what the app's called. Yeah, which connects to my server. And then I also use an app called Arc that's available for iOS and does a really good job of taking the raw data and translating it into places and activities. So it'll auto-detect runs and walks and stuff like that.
Is that ARC or ARK?
ARC.
ARC. Cool. Would either of you like to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about where you get location data from?
Sure. I'm Anton Reese, and I'm kind of mostly thinking about location and how I can evolve my blog to do with location. Currently, we do nothing. In fact, we do the opposite. We strip out all location data from like uploaded photos. We don't store your location for anything. Mostly just because I want to default to having everything private and don't want anyone to be surprised if location data is shared. But I want to think about what we can do and let people opt into.
David, would you like to?
Well, I use a variety of disorganized things that I'd like to organize. So on my phone is a copy of GPS Logger. I'm an Android user, so I can't use Overland. And that allows you to save the data locally into a file, which you could then upload somewhere. But also I have a program on my phone that is sending my location to my house, where it's used for geofencing to determine whether or not I'm in the house. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not in the house, it turns on the cameras. If I'm in the house, it turns them off. So I've used that system in the past to sort of bootstrap my website knowing where I am by asking my house if I'm there or not. But since that seems somewhat redundant, one of these days I'm going to build something. And my website keeps track and posts of location if I ask it to. So you saw I did the demo earlier where I pressed a button in the indigenous Android app. It retrieved the location from the phone and attached it to the post and sent it to my site, and my site did the rest. It figured out where that location was, displayed a map, and handled all of the details. But that's on a voluntary, not a constantly tracking basis. So I do not store tracking data regularly. I only track where I am when I'm actually posting, which may work for you. And if you're looking to, if you make it a voluntary button, it may solve your problem.
How about you folks remotely? Does anybody want to speak up there?
Sure. Jonathan LaCour, cleverdevil.io. I'm an iOS user, so I use Overland. And I have a little web service that I built that stores all of the location data in Amazon S3. And I pull the current location down every minute to my website's server that it runs on in a static file. And then whenever I post anything on my site, it attaches that location data onto the post as metadata. And then I show the map of where I was. I have a private mapping functionality that can show me daily basis kind of full paths of all of the places that I've been as well. But that's only available to me. But my current location is always visible and available on my site.
Anybody else remote?
Hi, I'm Doug, DougBeal.com, and Swarm and Instagram. I'm not very good about IndieWebbing my location.
Do you bridge that back to your site?
I do.
Both Swarm and Instagram?
Yes.
Cool. All right. So sounds like we use a pretty wide variety of things. How do we get this to a useful form? I take it that the IndieWeb tools already do a reasonable job of that. Is that fair to say? So
it depends on which tool. It's back to everybody builds their own implementation of that. So it depends on what ecosystem you're in. For example, Microblog is an IndieWeb-based site, but it doesn't admit it have a location component. Most micropub clients have a location option where they'll send your location if the client supports it. But back to if the endpoint doesn't support it, then it will just ignore the information. And then you get to, even if you have the information, there are people who just store it and not display it. Back to, it's there, but if you don't see it, it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a wide gambit.
And I would add that so with something like Own Your Swarm, when it sends a micropub request with a location, if the endpoint doesn't support location, but it supports the like fallback summary text, you can get some basics. Yeah. So like that would work with micro.blog, for example, or another blog. It would just say like I checked into
the basic text
or the text version. So
that makes sense. And how are folks storing that information? Are they using things like GeoJSON or storing that in some other format?
I could say, so I have a server, so it stores it in a static file. That's Aaron Brecky's client for viewing the location data.
It's actually the data store that is the client's part of it as well.
Okay.
It has an interface, so it's a data store for it.
But I'd be very interested in knowing how to store, the best way to store like path data so that it's queryable, like from a database. If anybody has any pointers.
What does WordPress do? Where does it put the location?
Well, right now it's only attached to a post, so it just stores it inside the post.
In just post text?
Post meta.
Post meta, okay.
So at some point I'll probably do something else, because I keep thinking about building something similar to Compass attached to a WordPress site so that it can just query another part of it. But for now, the only way to look it up is by post, because I don't store it on a minute-by-minute basis.
Mm-hmm. What would you be interested in doing when you search on paths?
Calculating. Well, so I'd like to show like the actual, I guess it's a two-part thing. I'd like to show like activities as a GeoJSON type thing on a map. Yep. But then also to be able to query like where something occurred. A lot of times I have that stored as a path, but there aren't individual locate, like it's not necessarily making a location entry for every minute or whatever, but it might be a part of a bigger blob of the path between two places. Like if it occurred over an hour or whatever, it'd still be sort of like one object.
So my experience with those is that the paths are formed out of discrete points. Mm-hmm. You can decompose them. So I've had a bunch of recent experience with the GPX format and also with GeoJSON. Mm-hmm. And a track in GPX is a sequence of points. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty easy to, if you want to find a particular time or the location you were at that was closest to a point, to decompose the track.
Okay. So you might store like the start and end time, and then you would get the the whole path where you were in the middle point, and then deconstruct it to figure out like an exact.
So I could show you what that looks like actually.
The problem is, if you go back 5 or 10 years, the point that you're at might have changed identities.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So you used to be a big fan of the local coffee shop, and then that was 5 years ago. Now it's, let's say, the local bookstore, and you haven't patronized that. But if you've updated your data, suddenly it looks like you spent a lot of time at a place that didn't exist.
Right. It's somewhere seedy now.
Okay, so it's no longer. It used to be a coffee shop. Now it is a bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they now think you're an alcoholic as opposed to a caffeine addict.
Right. But yeah, I don't want to derail it with something like technical that's not relevant to.
Okay. So is anybody else doing any form of long-term storage in a searchable way?
So mine is in S3, and I basically there's a service called Athena, and you can actually query S3 data with SQL. And so basically I've got a data table defined that crawls the JSON in the bucket and pulls that out, basically treats it like an SQL table. And then I just can query it. And then on a daily basis, I run, well, actually twice a day, I run an Athena query to basically say, give me all of the locations for this day in basically a really nice, easy to read CSV kind of format. And I store that in a known location in my bucket. So I do that every 12 hours. That way I'm not like constantly querying with Athena. I'm only doing it because you pay. Every single query you pay for. So I just basically pre-generate all that, and then I'm just fetching the data. But that's sort of my technique. I don't really do much in the way of like, querying, have I ever been near this location ever? I'm guessing I could, but I've never even really thought about doing that.
Yep.
So am I right in understanding Athena will try to determine if you like, so a lot of apps will consider like activities and they'll have places. So like, does this try to like infer times where you're like stopped for a period and make that a location?
No. So with Overland, you have a bunch of different ways you can set up the client to send data, and it does it. The way I have it configured is it sends in batches of 200 points or so every 5 minutes. And it doesn't include anything about like location in terms of like mapping that to some sort of known place. It literally just sends the coordinates, and that's all I store. If I'm going to be going to a significant location I care about, I check in with Swarm, and that gets published to my site as well. Although those two storage modes are kind of completely separate. So it's not really organized to that. But to me, if I want to do like a place, I do Swarm. If I want to do like just pure location tracking, I just let Overland handle that in the background.
Okay.
Locations in terms of actually really hard. You have two choices. You can create your own database over time, and then that's a pain in the neck. You could use a public database, which would be, let's see, Google has one, Foursquare will let you use theirs, except then you get to terms of service about when you're republishing their data and how you're using it. And right now we don't have a community venue service.
Does OpenStreetMap not have points of interest?
They do, but I've never seen anybody actually sort of effectively use it in that way.
It's probably not as complete. I mean, we're a little bit spoiled with Foursquare, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But well, the thing is,
the Foursquare API would be fine for like a personal site, I think. But the problem is they really do want you to put like your logo, their logo on everything you do and stuff.
There was a whole discussion about whether or not, I've read their terms of service. It's a bit vague on whether or not you can use it for personal use and where the attribution actually has to be.
Yeah.
But let's see, OpenStreetMap points of interest need not be mapped to a point. So they don't really have necessarily an effective query point, though. You could search by name or category, but I've never been able to find exactly where you go if you give them coordinates, if they'll tell you what the points of interest are nearby. So I've never seen that type of search, which is what you'd need. And that's sort of an annoying problem to solve. Because if you do it yourself, locations are relevant to you, which is actually pretty good, because your audience.
Right.
However, if you crowdsource with a bunch of other people, then these places that you haven't gone to yet will automatically come up.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people like Foursquare, because they don't have,
So,
and all that data was contributed by people. I don't think the people at Foursquare themselves paid to put it in. They just relied on everybody adding places when they didn't exist. So it already their data.
one approach I've seen is that people won't necessarily use a database. They'll just like type in the name of the place, right? And like known the IndieWeb CMS, it has a check-in kind of capability. And when you check in, you can literally just type in the name of the place.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't remember you're checking the same place again. You just type it again, right? Yeah.
Yeah, for a long time. So the web app that I demoed is a travel log. So it has a location field, and it would attempt to get a map for that location and remember across that same typed location what map I had selected if I looked the map. But it does seem like figuring out what that is pretty subtle.
I have spent some time on that, and it involves taking that information from one of 5 different data sources. So there's a lot of reverse geocoding out there, and after my first API decided to stop letting me use it, I put in 4 so that if one of them goes down, I just switch to the next one. So I'm prepared for any eventuality in the universe. Except all of them shutting down, I suppose. And I keep adding more just to cover myself. I think I have 3 weather providers, 5 map providers, and 4 reverse geocoding providers.
All right, so does anybody have anything else they want to say about data translation or storage for querying?
Storage is something I've been thinking.
So there are a lot of kind of giant sledgehammers to bring to that. There are things like PostGIS, which is an extension package for the Postgres database that is used for geographical information services that handles location sorts of things as top-level constructs. So like points and regions and paths are all things that you can literally write SQL queries that understand those things at a very deep level. For my purposes, I have found just latitude and longitude numeric values to be sufficient.
What was the discussion on yesterday? Geohashing as an option, depending on how much resolution you wanted.
Sure, you could geohash, and that would let you do things like distance checks or uniquely finding things pretty efficiently. I don't have enough data to care about efficiency.
That was the advice people gave me when I said I was worried about it. How many lines are you putting in? And if I'm trying to set up for the next 30 years, then I probably need a lot of data storage. However, who knows?
Can you explain a little more about geohashing and like what it looks like?
I'm probably not a great person to do that, but the latitude and longitude are a very straightforward way to map to places on the Earth's surface, but there are some calculations that are harder to do with that, like finding the nearest thing of a certain type that is near a particular point. You can exhaustively look at every location, compare the points, do the surface distance on those. But if instead you say, okay, is it in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere? Okay, that eliminates half of them. Is it in the Eastern Hemisphere or the Western Hemisphere, and you're only looking at a quarter. So you can hash that location in a way that lets you efficiently do the search to find things that are nearby.
Well, the only problem I keep hearing is that it gets a bit confused near the poles. But if anybody planning on visiting the North or South Pole in the near future, so we'll probably say, "Ooh, we have a little guest."
He's doing Minecraft, so he's also working on mapping.
Right. Where would you start for you have the points and you want to determine if it falls within a boundary?
What's the boundary?
Either like zip code or neighborhood. If you just have a path.
Yeah. So for things like zip codes, you can get shape files for those, which are geometric descriptions of the area, and then doing the is this lat long inside of that that region is a pretty straightforward operation.
I'm just doing radius at the moment.
Right.
Is that something that post GIS?
PostGIS can absolutely do that.
Okay.
But there are lots of other packages
that
would let you do that.
Cool. And if you wanted to go to the most basic, the mathematical formulas, you can just Google it, and they actually will come up with 15 example functions.
Yep.
So I don't understand what the math is. I just sort of stole it from someone else.
Yeah, and so one of the things, you can make this as complicated as you want to. The Earth is not a sphere, and there are a bunch of different models for what shape the Earth actually is when you're locating things. And if you care, you can get a model that does that in very high fidelity, but you probably don't. So if your shapefile for, like, I believe you can get US zip codes as part of the Tiger data set from the census. And those shapefiles are certainly adequate for any reasonable needs.
Okay.
Yeah. Cartography boundary shapefile, zip code tabulation areas, 2017, downloadable in a zip file.
Awesome.
Is that from Tiger?
US Census Bureau.
Yeah. Cool. Does anybody want to talk about what they'd like to do with location data?
Well,
I think I said a little.
What I like to do, so I've tracked all this stuff. I have a bunch of raw data. What I'm most interested in is like things like maybe on this day you went to these locations, or this past year these were the most popular spots that you went to. And that's why I'm more interested in like changing these things to places. And so swarm's definitely an option, but I usually am not thinking about checking into a place while I'm there.
Yep.
So it's usually in hindsight. So I'd like to, like, at the end of the day, run a process that says like these are most likely the places, and then manually fix them if I have to. But then at the end of the year, kind of like my end goal with all this stuff is always like the Feltron annual report, to have like a cool like data driven summary of my past year.
I like the ones that Google keeps doing. They keep sending me my mapping data in history, which cities I visited, if I've turned it on for them. And since I don't have my own data store and theirs is downloadable, I've been using theirs for now.
Yep.
So Google knows everywhere I've been since 2006.
Yeah, the takeout stuff is a little creepy, but
I knew they were doing it. It's not. Yeah. That's sort of the difference. It's not. It is creepy in a way, but I turned it on knowing full well that I'd let them do it.
Yeah.
And that it would get. And it's really gotten better over time. If you look at a 2005 or 2006 data set from them, they filled in a lot of data compared to what people, because they now know what more places are. They used to, because they kept. They had these Wi-Fi networks they were doing GeoIP, so it would be 1 minute I'm in England, the next minute I'm in Germany, and then I'm back in England 5 minutes later. No, I'm not. That didn't happen. I think they've gotten a lot better at realizing no, that was not the truth. But the idea is I can extract that data and actually build it into my own system, and then turn off the Google one the day I actually build something. But for now, at least I have a record of it.
Yep.
Is anyone pulling in either here or that you know of, like pulling in location data from other social networks like Twitter and Facebook check-ins and
Swarm is the only one that I know of that we have a, well, Facebook is notoriously hard to do anything with right now. Twitter, if you have a, does have location on it, so, but I don't know if anybody's pulling it in.
I haven't heard of anything most.
Swarm is the only one I know of that people are actively pulling in with location data.
I think it's mostly because people use, most people in IndieWeb are going from their site out to Twitter instead of the other way around.
Yeah.
That's why Swarm is popular, you know, as a outside in kind of approach.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm in the minority of people who joined Swarm because of the IndieWeb as opposed to having Swarm and wanting to link it into their website later.
I'm definitely not in.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if anybody else falls into the category of not having the service before the integration. People just kept telling me, oh, I want to use this Swarm, so I tried.
Years ago until I discovered Own Your Swarm, and it made me start using it again. So similar, right? I used it for years and then stopped for probably another 5 years before I started using it again.
And aside from...
I never used it before IndieWeb.
And aside from visiting the same restaurant over and over again, I only use it when I go on trips. Now it works. Now, so I guess I'm much less tempted to use it. Now I want to build my own version.
I use it pretty obsessively even around town. I don't check in at work and I don't check in at home, but everywhere else I go, I usually check in. And it's been really nice to have a history of like consistently where I've been at a given time. It helps settle arguments between me and my girlfriend about whose turn it is to pay for dinner because I know that you put. No, but paid at this restaurant and she paid at that restaurant, so it's my turn.
That's a comment, the price of the meal.
Yeah, I like it a lot for similar things. Like if I'm talking to somebody about like, oh, last time I was in Portland, there was this really great place you should go check out, and I didn't note it at the time, but I like to go back and say, oh, is this place?
Yep, for sure. You mentioned using Moves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I used that a long time back. They got bought by Facebook.
Yeah.
So Moves was doing detection of the points of interest that you were probably staying at based on dwell time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that information exportable?
It was, but you missed your opportunity. So the ARC app is great for that because it's all private to your phone. It sends nowhere, and it does those same calculations. And whenever Move shut down, he built an importer so you could download your JSON history. And so I have all that. So even though I've only been using this app for maybe a year or so, it has all the history from Moves before that.
Cool. And your challenge is turning that, which is not place marked, into place marks, basically.
Right. Well, basically, so with Overland or Encompass, I have a lot of data that's unprocessed. So with my expertise, that's not very useful. For ARC, I have all the POI stuff and activity stuff, but it's only locally on my phone. So then I need to build something for my site to parse that, the points of interest. And that's more like KML or JSON that you can pull from the app, but it's a manual process of pulling a JSON or KML file or GPX or something and then processing it. And I haven't started down that path either. So Moves had a nice JSON API where you could ping it regularly and import it in a easy to parse format.
So my particular interest is I go on trips and want to create something that helps me memorialize that trip. I often am not able to, like I come back from a trip and people ask me, what did you do? And I'm not able to give a reasonable answer to that question until I've gone through like an integrating process where I think about all of the places that I was and figure out which was the most interesting. And I'm very visual, and maps are a really great way for me to organize that process. And also, I just like maps, and having an artifact that shows where I've been, whether anybody else wants to look at it or not, is a nice thing. I had a giant map of the United States that I drew a line on for all the places that I did road tripping, and I just like to do that. So finding ways to integrate data on the kind of lifetime scale is interesting to me. I'd really like to have a web globe toy that shows all of my trips over all of time and lets you zoom in. And leaflets, which I mentioned in the intro talks, is making me hopeful that that's now something that I can actually build in a reasonable way. Seems like it's very easy to get GeoJSON into that, so it's just a matter of processing everything so that I can export it in the format that I need for that. Mm-hmm. Any of y'all on remotes have any particular uses that you're excited about?
My favorite use case for a lot of the things that I'm doing tracking on, including location, is my summary pages, which is something that I just started doing recently. But if you go to my site, at the top, there's little boxes that will show you the last 12 months. And if you click on one, it'll show you all the stuff from that month, including a big map with all my check-in locations. Cool. I don't put in non-significant locations, which basically means the map is generated only from my swarm locations. But I like that for a historical look back, because then I'm only picking up the significant stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But that's probably my favorite, because it gives you great context. It's like, hey, here's all the stuff I was listening to. Here's some photos that I took. Here's the places I was. So if I took a vacation or something, I can zoom in and see all the different places I visited and then look up and see all the photos. So that's my favorite use.
Awesome. How do you build that map?
It is using Leaflet.
Okay.
It's on my list. I did a very intensive day back in November, and I actually, because I didn't have time to post from everywhere, I used Swarm to map out each location I was at, and then went back in and associated the photos taken at the time. Yep. And manually created a post that put them all together. But at some point, I'll have to automate that. I think we're set to wrap up in a few minutes. All right. Schedule calls for this to go till about 45, and then 5 minutes, and then 50 is.
I was just curious, like, what are you guys doing with it? Wasn't like trying to grab or anything like that.
Yeah, we're in. This is location data sources.
Okay, cool.
So this is the weirdest location data source that I ever did, which was me tracking an entire day from 5:45 in the morning to approximately 1:25 the following morning in every single place I went.
That's a lot of places.
How did you do that?
My brother talked me into doing something called the Disney Parkology Challenge, which was every Disney ride in a single day in all 4 Disney World parks. Mm-hmm. So I tracked it minute by minute every place that I was, and then added the pictures in later, which were the proof that I did it. So that's how perky I look at on the first one. And down to the end, this is how perky I look at the end. You can see me in the background. Yeah. So that's just the example. That is something I would like to automate if my brother ever talks me into doing something that crazy again, which he's my older brother, he probably will.
Yep.
So in your travel log, are you creating the maps post by post on your own site, or are you embedding them, building them somewhere else?
So I have actually gotten out of the habit of travel logging on a daily basis on my trips. actually the rise of internet availability has kind of killed my downtime on trips. I used to write a post every day and find a map that held that. Originally, I was using Bing Maps actually because it had really good location information about small villages and places like that. But it looks like all of my Bing Maps are broken, so apparently they shut off that API at some point. But lately, I've been carrying a GPS receiver with me, and at the end of the trip, gathering up all of the sources and doing a lot of merging and splitting and correlating with the Foursquare check-ins or Swarm check-ins to figure out why I was at that point for that time.
Okay.
I've been meaning to use the location information from my photos on my phone to associate those as well. Have not gotten that far.
Okay.
Anybody else would like to share? All right. I guess we can wrap up. Prepare for the next session.
You can take a 10-minute instead of a 5-minute break. And I'll set up the stream for the next one in a minute.
So are the times on this? Oh, they did get updated. Cool.
Yeah. If you refresh the page, it'll show you.
That did it.
Yeah. So we have 2:50 for the next one, so about 10 minutes. Now, in this room will be micropayments, but I have to be in the other room because it's my session. So I'm going to set up the equipment early. I may ask if is anybody staying for micropayments?
Yours is the summary of the formats and the identity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be in that one.
But what I'm saying is, whoever's staying in here, just if you want to, if you just touch somebody, they'll expand. But cool. There shouldn't be the need for any large amount of fiddling with it. It should just run. I have to keep changing rooms. So yeah, we're going to terminate this room. I'm going to open up for the microphone, and that'll be up for the next few minutes. Classroom in the chat. I don't know what happened to the 2 or 3 people who said they weren't joining.
Me either. All right. Thanks. And it looks like Doug is on the Etherpad. Hi, Doug. I'm waving at the camera. Hey. Just going to wait a few minutes for others to show up, but I'm kind of just spitballing what things I use currently. And there are sort of different realms, I think, that I've kind of outlined, which is existing content, new content, and sort of generic content monetization and what forms that takes. So yeah. Hey.
Catching up on the session. That's fine.
Which session is this?
The micropayments?
Micropayments, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You want me to go tell folks?
Oh, good. So,
I'll just try it, because I thought it was.
okay.
There, so. You have remote people?
There are a couple, but they're saying that it might be not working, but I'm not sure what to do.
I'd go with one, David or Aaron. If it's a,
I'm gonna see if I can see it from here.
just tell her if you need me to get anybody or help.
Yeah, if you could please. I'm not quite sure. It looks like it's set up correctly, but I'm not quite. Oh, I see. Okay. Jameson says we're back. All right. And Doug, are you also using the YouTube stream? Yeah. Computers are hard.
Can you? Hey there, I'm just hop onto the I guess it's the group Jitsi.
Great. Cool. All right. So I guess I just wanted to kind of talk about folks that are consider themselves to be content creators and how we monetize content and what sort of forms that takes. So I've started here in the Etherpad, kind of splitting it out into different categories based on what are people paying for, how are they paying for it, what services are used. So, for example, I write puzzles and puzzle books as one of my sort of side jobs. And so for my existing content, I have some that is paywalled with PayPal so that you need to pay before you can view the content. I have people that pledge for new content via Patreon. And I also have a donation button for PayPal and an Amazon wish list for just general donations for followers of the blog. And one recent addition I've added is there's I believe it's a spin-off of Chrome browser called Brave Browser. And they have sort of cryptocurrency called Basic Attention Token that's similar to Bitcoin in a way. I don't quite know the technical parts behind that. But the basic sort of gist of it is that as you use Brave Browser to browse people's websites, you can make payments to them for viewing their content. And
that happens automatically, just based on the fact that you visit it.
I think so. I think it's partially that.
So I actually signed, well, I didn't sign up for it. I tried. So I found out that they automatically accept payments whether or not you sign up for it from their website. And you can go and sort of like claim your website. Okay. So I made an account and I claimed aaronpractical.com.
Sure.
And then it now shows me how many credits I have in their thing.
Right.
And they keep sending me an email saying you need to set up an account to cash out. Right. I literally cannot figure out how to do that.
It's not an easy process.
They're like, go sign up for a thing over here and then go connect it over here. And I'm like, I don't even understand what's going on. But it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
But I've not been able to successfully cash out the credits they're racking up.
I unfortunately don't have that problem because I don't have enough visitors that use Brave to even get that far. But from what I understand, they use sort of a third-party system that manages the wallet for the basic attention token. And you have to sign up with them in order for their API to post the payment for you. And I don't recall, and I suppose since technology is here, we can just look it up. But if I understood correctly, there's just some extent with Brave, it does it automatically where, depending on how much of your attention is divided between the sites you visit, that's how much goes to that particular publisher.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also, I believe, options to pay more. And then I also believe there was something about, it does ad blocking, but it can replace the ads with something else. But I could be wrong on that, so I'm going to just go ahead and look it up so we can learn together.
So another example of, I guess it's in your notes, but I have actually successfully used PayPal for receiving small payments from people.
Sure.
So like I have a page on my site called tip/tip,
Right.
and people can go there and send me small amounts of money.
Yeah.
So thanks for software, right? So like I get not very much money through that, but every now and then someone drops me like $5 because they want the iPhone app or something like that, right?
Sure.
Which is nice, and that's I understand how to cash that out. That's the important part of that process.
Most definitely. I'm in the same boat with you there. On occasion, I'll get donations, 5, maybe 10 if people are super generous. And that is definitely an option. I noticed there was something that Doug had posted called IndiePay.me, and I'm not super familiar with that, but it sounded like, if I recall correctly, sort of like an indie version of what is it called? Patreon.
No. It's more like a way to just send someone money without actually sending the money. So it's more like tracking debt. So So if you went out to lunch and you paid for my lunch and be like, hey, I'm going to send you $5. I could instead use IndiePay.me to sort of keep track of that debt.
Yeah.
So it's I post on my site and say, hey, I'm paying you $5. And I also like tell IndiePay.me that, and it keeps track of Aaron knows .com. And then if you want to pay me back, then our debt's zero.
So it's almost.
It doesn't actually move money.
Right. Okay.
It's tracking debt.
So it's almost like a more manual, like reverse version of blockchain, or
that's that's probably stretching the analogy there.
Okay.
But it's I guess IndiePay.me also keeps track of the. It also asks people to confirm that the payment was made. So it's not moving any money around. It's tracking debt, which I guess is also true of blockchain. So in that sense, it's similar, kind of.
Yeah.
But it's not. So it is essentially an aggregator of payment posts between independent websites.
Okay.
So like, I could. We've done a couple of experiments similar in the past where I can just like make a post, web mention somebody and say like, hey, I owe you $5. But then like it's hard to find that post or aggregate those if a bunch of those are made.
Right.
So IndiePay.me sits as like a mediator of watching all of those posts back and forth to keep track of the total running balance. Right.
Okay. But in theory, through micropub and microsub, is that correct? Or micropub?
Should be web mention, I thought. Let's go to the documentation page. Yeah. Logging in. Oh, it can use micropub to post to your site.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Otherwise, it'll just show you a post, and then you have to manually post on your site. And then it will tag the other person by sending a web mention to their site.
Okay. So it's still building on sort of the IndieWeb stack.
Yeah.
But it's like an app that manages the specific post type, I guess?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
so it can help you create posts on your site,
yeah.
And it then tracks the progress of those.
Okay, right on.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a really fun experiment. I wouldn't. I don't think it's been used a ton. It's definitely like requires a lot of pieces to be in place in order to work well. But I do think it's interesting.
That makes me wonder. And without getting too off topic, it might be cool to have, I'm going to click on the documentation links and make sure I'm not suggesting something that already exists. But like a sort of minimum viable, like what things do I need? So yeah, so it's like those are outlined but not quite like list that you actually have to read.
You have to read quite a bit. Yes.
The problem with having ADHD like that.
No, that's a good point. What's the least you can do to get started using this?
Right.
So the thing that I like about this is that it isn't trying to move money.
Right.
Because anytime you actually try to move money, there's just a million problems.
Sure.
And the least of which is like you open yourself up to dealing with fraud.
Right.
And if you're making a payment processor of any sort that is going to actually move money, you will get people using it who are using it to illegally transfer money and try to scam people out of money.
Right.
So I think this is a really nice approach because it means that you can effectively send money between people, but it doesn't actually.
Yeah.
And in a small community, it works fine. So I have actually quite a lot of experience with this. Like I, in college, lived with a room, like 7 people in a house.
Yeah.
And we had like, a few friends who were close friends of the group. So it was about like 10 or 12 people in total in this sort of like community where we all basically trusted each other. And if someone said, hey, I have $5, they would pay back eventually.
Right.
And we would go out to eat and like pay a share of phone bill and et cetera, et cetera. And it would be too much to actually like pay people cash or no money. That's what was fairly a thing then. So instead, I created a shared debt ledger system that we used to split the bills, and we just reconcile every month. So at the end of the month, we would like hand money around. A smaller number of amounts of money would be exchanged to sort of balance everything out. And in the rest of the month, we would all be racking up debt between each other, which would often cancel out over the course of the month, right?
Right.
And I think that like that also works really well when you're talking about really small amounts of money, because it is often too expensive to actually move that money.
Right.
So it's better to sort of keep track of the debt and then only reconcile every now and then.
And that, I think that's a really good point to kind of hit on, especially talking about like PayPal for those little donations. You say somebody made a $5 donation, but after fees, it ends up being like a $4.26 donation. And over a longer period of time, I think you could really get to a point where that's going to be tens and I want to say hundreds of dollars, but I don't think it's going to get to that point for one person. But
I mean, but the thing is that the smaller, like the fees often, there's like a base fee, so it's like 30 cents plus something. So if you want to be able to have someone send you $1, effectively you can't, because they would send $1.30. But if you get $1, if they send you $1, you get 70 cents. And like, that's just not practical. That's almost half of your money is gone in fees if you're getting a bunch of tiny donations, right?
Right.
And sure, if someone sends you $100, the fee is very small comparatively, so it's fine. But people aren't sending hundreds of dollars at that time. And it's very hard to have that small money.
That's true.
But I think also one of the reasons that the sort of shared debt ledger works is because it is based around a small community that has implicit trust around them for other reasons. So like, if a stranger on the internet wants $75, if they just say they owe me $5, I can't really like do much with that immediately,
right? Because
I don't know that they're going to actually pay me $5 when I want it. And if I wanted to then give it back to them, that's fine, right? Sure. But also, if I wanted to like give somebody else $5, I could like give them their $5, but then they don't necessarily trust that person because it's not actually a close community. So the shared debt thing works in a close community because everybody shares trust with each other.
Right.
And that is not usually true on the public internet. So it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge.
Oh, yeah. And I think one thing that we kind of get for granted in the IndieWeb community is small and has some of that built into it to an extent. But definitely having that sort of public accountability is definitely useful as well. I'm just kind of looking over the IndiePay documentation and getting an idea of it. I want to say Patreon last year went through a similar finding where they were testing out an idea they wanted to switch to where there were baseline transactional fees for patronage. And that was going to come with the same sort of issue where kind of death by a million paper cuts, or whatever the analogy is.
Yeah. Did they move because they do charge a fee right now, but were they going to move it to their site so it is?
Yeah.
So right now, like the creator pays, someone has $1 patron, they get 70 cents. And they were going to move it so that the person donating pays the fee, which means if you want to give them $1, they get $1, they pay $1.30. So they were just going to move.
That's right, actually. Yeah, I had a friend who was almost shut down his whole Patreon site because he was relying on donations of like $1, and it was just like not worth the trouble of then having to raise that price for everyone else. And I think, yeah, I don't remember the whole situation, but I remember it was a thing. And then Patreon did go back on that.
Yeah, they rolled it.
Yeah, it's hard.
I do. Sorry to to go back a moment. I like that this conversation, and like when we're talking about IndiePay, that it's very much about like a small community where there is trust, and it is like that's central to it. Because in contrast, when I look at a lot of like blockchain-based systems, they seem entirely about the idea that you could not have to have trust, and I just don't believe that works in practice. And there's been, all kinds of cases of like Bitcoin exchanges having money disappear and stuff that show that the idea of moving past trust entirely is fraught, to say the least. So I like this the kind of more modest approach of just a system for logging accountability to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Is the audio still breaking up? I see.
It seems a little better. The bandwidth, like the video, also keeps getting like really low resolution. So I think it's just the bandwidth is a bit shaky, but it's a little better at the moment. Thanks.
We don't have good bandwidth here for some reason.
Weird.
No, that's okay.
All right. Jack, do you have any? Is there anything that you currently use as far as any of the things we mentioned, or something else that we haven't?
I don't. I mean, I think I don't take any kinds of like payments through my website or any, anything like this. I think one of the, I was sort of interested in this session because I am not aware of very much of this going on in IndieWeb. Or at least I haven't seen. So I mean, I'm curious as to what could be possible, or if anyone is doing that. But to be honest, I know so little. I have so little experience with that.
Right. And there was another gentleman that had presented earlier when we were doing site demos that mentioned the concept of micropayments briefly, and I was hoping that he'd be in on this and kind of give his opinions. It's definitely something I think that is kind of on the smaller side, and you often see, like what you said, Aaron, with tip jars and sort of this voluntary nature of it. And then a lot of content beyond that starts to get siloed quite quickly. You have, for instance, Medium wanting you to sign up at the very least to start seeing their content, and trying to think of other examples, but even if it's not like an actual monetary wall, there's usually some sort of additional barrier that's coming into play.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, that reminded me of something. Interesting point about Patreon.
Okay.
So Patreon actually works also because of the sort of shared trust model, where everybody trusts Patreon, because the patrons are not paying creators directly.
Mm-hmm.
As a creator, you are not getting a bunch of small transactions. You're getting actually one transaction from Patreon.
Right.
And the same is true on the pledge side, where when you pledge, your card is not charged for every person you're donating to. Your card is charged once to Patreon, and Patreon then splits it out, which builds in the efficiency of aggregated payments where there isn't that credit card fee being hit for every single $1 donation. You pay the credit card fee once per month, and it's effectively split between all of them. Right. Everybody was pledging to, which I think was the problem they were trying to address, was that the recipients didn't actually know how much they were going to get, because the fee depends on your patrons and how many it's spread out over. But the nice thing is that fee gets to be spread out,
mm-hmm.
because that's always the problem with moving small amounts of money, is it's very expensive.
Right.
And Patreon sort of aggregates it together and makes it effectively larger amounts of money moving around, and then they just broker everything in between.
I think that also reminds me that there was a similar issue that they wanted to remove that was sort of one of the features touted by IndiePay in that respect, which is being able to have a lot of the debts cancel each other out. So, for instance, I'm a creator on Patreon, but I also am a patron of several other creators. So, I believe what they wanted to do is have payments be more frequent and based on the creations actually happening. And because of that, they were planning to get rid of that model of using the same funds that you've accumulated to do payments to other creators. And I wonder if there was some sort of legal risk around that they were trying to evade, or what the logic was. But that also kind of strikes me as a benefit of trusting that system, is that they charge me for a smaller amount because they are also taking into account what I've earned or what I've been pledged from my patrons.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me wonder how much scale you would run into with something like IndiePay when you have more than just a small group of friends that you trust.
Well, I mean, in the end, IndiePay.me is not actually moving money.
Right.
It's tracking debt and then tracking the payment of that debt. But the actual money has to be moved out of band.
Right.
So, like, it could work with untrusted parties because they still have to move the money somewhere else anyway.
That's true.
So, I think it's more useful I think because of that, it's not actually useful in a completely untrusted environment because it doesn't actually help you move the money. I think it is more useful within a relatively small group of people who are using it because they pay each other quite often, and they can actually end up preventing the need to move money through it.
Right. That makes more sense.
And it's kind of like the Patreon thing, like you're saying, like when you do get to pull it together, less money actually moves around in the end, because if you're getting $10 a month and then you're donating $10 a month to other people, effectively you have zero coming in and out. So you don't even need to have your credit card be touched ever. Right.
Okay, so I understand that to be true with Patreon, but is that the same sort of logic with IndiePay? Like, does it?
I think it doesn't move any money, but I think that's where it is useful, because if you do have like a handful of people who you often have $5 moving around between, it's very likely that will end up canceling out, and then there's no need to move money, and you can reconcile all the debt.
Right, and I think on a smaller basis that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I'm wondering is, does it do some of that reconciliation for you?
Yeah, I believe it keeps track of the sort of balance between people. So it'll tell you, like if you send me right now, make a post and say, hey, you owe me $5, and then I can say, hey, I owe you $5. IndiePay.me is like, oh, well, there's a $0 balance between two people.
Okay. Right, and then I think the other part where having a trusted system also is beneficial, and what I wondered if IndiePay does, and this is probably beyond that scope, but being able to manage those connections. So say I owe you $5 and you owe Gregor $5, it be able to say, okay, well, Dave, you just give $5 to Gregor and you know.
Right. Yeah, I can't remember if it does that or not. Yeah. See if I can log in.
And back to your other point too, that would mean Gregor would have to trust that I would do that, and that requires trust. So, just interesting thought about the pros and cons of that.
I think we are at the end of the session.
Are we? All right.
Oh no, 5 more minutes. 5 minute break.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I guess my other thing is just sort of aside from payments person to person, and in particular, just how do folks value their content? You know, what things feel worthy of having just a tip jar versus charging up front versus.
That's a good question. Yeah,
I'm just interested to hear.
For me, I because I have a full-time job, I don't feel like I need to charge upfront for other things I do online. That's why I don't charge for any of my like IndieWeb services that I run, like Aperture or things like that.
Sure.
Because I don't need to make money from them, so I do all that as donation based. Like even with the iPhone app, where like I actually have to pay $100 a year to have the developer account to have that exist.
Right.
But I still just accept donations for it, which almost make up the difference, but not actually. But I'm okay with that personally, just because I have a regular job. If I didn't have a regular job, I think I would feel differently.
Right.
And I would probably look for some of the things that I run in ways to actually charge, like really charge for them, not just have the donation.
Okay.
But that's where I'm at.
I feel pretty similarly about my situation. I don't have the Apple developer fees, but there's hosting fees for various things. How about you, Jack?
So I'm in graduate school, so all of my income comes in the form of sort of scholarships up front. So I'm probably in a similar boat where the work that I'm doing as a developer, at least these days, I'm not relying on for income really, and I sort of have it built in to my finances, so I don't need that. So that's why I haven't even endeavored to set up a donations or anything like that. But yeah.
Okay.
Which I wonder how, because it seems to me like among some, maybe like, well, quite a few sort of projects that are trying to build alternative webs are thinking about these sort of micropayments. And it doesn't seem to be an issue for IndieWeb, and I wonder if a big part of that is many of the people that work on it are not relying on their IndieWeb work for their income, it seems like. So it might be different if people were considering this their full-time job, or if there's a different group of people trying to use the IndieWeb.
Right, and I think that's something where, again, there's some of that going on platforms like Patreon, but those really are kind of silos at this point, where it's hard to kind of embrace the IndieWeb fundamentals because you're really boxed into this platform. In my case, I use Patreon to link to my blog and use that as a portal into it, but there's still all the things that I have to trust Patreon for and rely on them for that.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge because there are benefits to the people donating to have it be centralized in Patreon, because it's like similar interface, consistent interface. They can bundle the payments and all those benefits to people donating. But so it's like these two things are working at odds of each other, because there's also plenty of like WordPress plugins to have subscription services, like to have a donation platform be just on self-hosted.
Right.
But then you lose the discoverability of Patreon and the bundled payments, and people are more likely to then like cancel their donations if they realize they're getting charged $5 a month, whereas they wouldn't even notice it on Patreon, and they're happy to have like $50 a month go to whoever on Patreon, split 10 ways, but they're going to notice yours if it's its own recurring charge. So it's like, how do you get these two things these two different views to happen in a good way for everybody?
Exactly.
It's tough. It's definitely tough.
Has there been any talk, maybe Aaron, you might have some idea, is the W3C engaged in talk about like standards for payments? Is that on their radar?
I know there's the browser API for collecting payment information, essentially credit card information. and that is a recent standard that is now actually rolled out in several browsers, which is really cool. And I actually do like what they did with it, which is they made an API that has nothing to do with actually moving money, because that is just a land minefield, whatever you call it, of a map into. So instead, they're like, well, if we make an API to make it easy to get payment information, then we let everybody deal with how to get the money. They're on their own. So now the end result is like, actually, I think I implemented this last year at Austin here, 2017 in Austin, which is my tip page has a button which uses this API, which means if you're on an iPhone and you tap it, the Apple Pay dialog pops up, and you can pay me directly using Apple Pay, which means you don't even have to enter a credit card. That's cool. Which is super cool. And it means that I charge your card directly, but you don't have to do any work to get your card in there. So that is, and that's a recent, I think it was just launched at, like, right before IndieWebCamp Austin last time. That was, like, finalized by W3C.
Does that mean that then you would receive the credit card information? So, like, people would have to trust you more than if they were just using, like, I would think if I'm using Apple Pay often, I'm trusting Apple, not the recipient, right?
Well, yeah, so with Apple Pay, it's, I think it's all done through that virtual card. So, like, I'm not getting your actual card info, I'm getting your Apple Pay card info. Okay. But if it's not Apple Pay, then it's just like the browser essentially autofilling credit card info. So yeah, you are trusting the person to handle the credit card info properly. But I use Stripe for it, so I don't actually even see your credit card info. Not to do it. Yeah. Cool. Now we are at, and now people are coming into this session. So we will.
Are you staying for personal blogging, or are you going
I was
to
going
Link
to
Rock?
go to Link Rock.
Okay, I'll take your chair then, because I have to
Alright.
be near the screen to key in the next.
Thanks. That was a fun session.
I look forward to watching it on the.
Hopefully the stream looks good. The bandwidth here is terrible.
Well, so far the experience has been good in terms of the people watching on the screen, because we've seen them pretty clearly.
Yeah, we can hear it. Jack is fine. Have you been
every time? Yeah.
Stopping the video to make a new live stream thing every time?
Yeah.
I had to put in a new key.
Yeah, I keyed it in, but it kept saying that it was. You have a third key? Because I'm
No.
still on the second key.
No, but I had to like think about it. So
Yeah, I forget
put it-
every time.
I put it in the
Okay, I've just been reading it off this one here. That's probably a good idea. It didn't even occur to me to actually. I've just been typing it from my computer. But not that easy. Yeah, I know. I've typed it in like 10 minutes. I just have to look. That's why the other thing on there is the actual schedule. So what I can do is hang up on. I'm here, holding down the fork.
It's chillier out here. Yeah,
I enjoy good micro formats conversation. It makes me want to consume more of it. There's still that. I have this idea that I keep thinking of doing, which is import. When you create a WordPress user account and you put in a URL, try to read that URL and
pre-populate the other info
from there. I got the idea from. I've been thinking about it for a while, but I got the idea of pushing it up when Indigenous for Android started doing it in order to show the image for your login account. But that would be an interesting, little project that I hadn't planned on doing. If I could
Sorry, what was your name again? Steven. Steven. Right. One other, I forgot to talk about this one earlier in the session, but another thing that we use microformats for a lot with like these Bridgie services and stuff. So like Bridgie Publish actually reads your microformats when you publish. So like I published the node on my site with microformats, and when I send a web mention actually to Bridgie, and on there, then they basically read my my post, parse information out, and post it to my Twitter account. Okay. They're really just parsing like the plain text, although it does do photos too. So if I upload a photo,
it does a lot of properties that we don't realize. For example, it does location.
Oh yeah, that's right. I've never used that.
I made sure it worked, and then found out that there's actually a setting inside Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm single-handedly responsible for Ryan continually updating the documentation as I found. So it's, oh yeah, it works. Well, no, it doesn't. Oh,
yeah,
well,
so it can be really useful in publishing like that with some of these tools.
Cool. So you write, I'm sorry, what was your name again? Dave?
David.
David.
I went and got this fancy name badge just so people would remember who I was, because nobody can ever read my handwriting.
So you write like a suite for WordPress that handles a ton of the micropub spec?
Well, let's put it this way. I just kept adding plugins. So it started out as one.